Keep them out of the light. Keep them away from water. Don't get them wet. But the most important rule, the rule you can never forget, no matter how much they cry, no matter how much they beg, never, ever feed them after midnight. We recently talked Alien, Prometheus, E.T., and The Thing. But tonight, we talk Gremlins.
Some films stick with you for a long time. They form the foundation of your movie watching experience, whether you grew up in the 60s, the 70s, or the 80s, the 90s, 2000s. The movies that you watched as a kid are the ones that really form the foundation of your cinematic literacy. You're drawn in by certain hallmarks of cinema. The cute monster, the bug-eyed monster, the demons. But I think in the end, you're just thrilled to see a fun story, well told, that maybe scares the shit out of you a little bit. In 1984, when Gremlins premiered, I don't think anybody really had an understanding of what it was going to be. Fortunately, it was at a time before the internet, so you didn't know what these things were until you went to the theater. Trailers had this magic to them, this magic of mystery, where they would grab a hold of you and force you to wonder, what the hell are they not showing you? It's a magic that has been lost in the internet age with spoilers and various platforms. There's something that's been taken away from us as moviegoers. Gizmo was cute. He was a sweet little, I don't know, gerbil, monkey, cross, I don't know what he was. But it was when the Gremlins took over. It was when they cocooned and came out, and they were these evil little monsters. That's when the film got fun. That's when the film got interesting. And that's why 30 some odd years later, we're still talking about these movies. On this week's episode of Watch This with RickRamos, we go back. We have talked aliens. We don't know what the hell Gremlins are. We don't know what the hell a Mogwai is. But this is going to be a fun conversation. So, Mr. Chavez, as always, when did you first see this movie? And what is your relationship to it?
I don't remember when I first saw the movie.
Well, I guess most importantly, did you see it when you were a kid, or did you see it when you were older? Yeah. Okay, so that's the important thing. You have to have seen this movie when you were a kid to really fully appreciate it in the way that a movie lover can enjoy something where it sticks with them, where it really grabs a hold of them, and you need a sense of wonder for a movie like this. So that's what I'm interested in.
I had this it was like a toy chest, but it was like a bench.
Mm-hmm.
And it had it was like a church pew, like a bench, but it was long enough to and of course being like me, but still being a kid, like I used to like to hide places, and if I emptied out my toys and everything, I can hide inside, and it was like a coffin, so I could I could open the lid from the inside the way like Dracula does, you know.
That seems about right.
But on the outside, on one of the sides of this bench that was like a chest with a lid, like a storage bench or whatever, I had stickers. I had Gremlin stickers, and it was like all of the Gremlins, like all these evil Gremlins, including Stripe, and then there was one of Gizmo, but in the pink Corvette.
The Barbie car, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, the Barbie car. And so I remember, I don't remember like at what point I saw the film. I don't remember. I know I didn't see it in the theater, but I don't know when. But I know I had the I had those stickers and I knew what Gremlins were, and I understood, and it was part of the childhood thing. It was part of that 80s.
Mm-hmm.
80s animal thing, but at the same time 80s like merchandising thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the same as like fucking obviously Star Wars, also, you know, He-Man, G.I. Joe, later Ninja Turtles, all that type of shit. We talked about, as you said, like we don't know what the Mogwai is, but we know that like in terms of the 80s, we've been talking about how aliens or creature films seem to have swung between dangerous on the one side and this kind of like safe and vulnerable on the other. And we kind of went from Alien in 1979, Ridley Scott, to E.T. in 82. And then back to The Thing in 82, which was dangerous again. And then Starman in 84. And then this one in 84. And Cocoon and Flight of the Navigator and Batteries Not Included and Alien Nation, which are all these kind of like, how do we relate? How can we relate to these creatures, and how do these creatures relate to us in a way that's very cooperative and safe, and you know, maybe they can help us or we can help them. But the opposite side is this 80s thing of like, you know, The Thing, fucking aliens, Predator, They Live. You know, communion is like, is this a blessing, this weird relationship, or are they gonna fucking like anally probe us on a fucking operating table, you know? And Gremlins is the film that contains both of those sides, both sides of the coin, and the creature itself contains both of those things, because the creature will fucking change. If you feed it after midnight, it'll become this mischievous, dangerous, sexual, abusive creature. It speaks to our worst instincts. Whereas Gizmo, cute, vulnerable, large-eyed, as we talk with like E.T., like it speaks to the nurturing aspect of humanity. We want to take care of it. We want to hold it. We want to keep it away from this blinding light. We want to feed it, but we have to be careful. This other aspect wants to just feed and laugh. And it's it's like this Freudian fucking, it just wants to fuck and flash, open up its raincoat and flash people and be obscene and be destructive and kill. And it's crazy because it's like you want, you know, for the most part, I think that most people, they want Gizmo to be safe in this film. They don't want anything to happen to the dog, and they don't want anything to happen to Gizmo. But you enjoy this freedom, this hooliganism, this kind of like Fight Club aspect of Project Mayhem Gremlin style, where these things are just taking over a suburb and fucking everything up, including killing like this, because it is a Christmas movie, this Scrooge-like villain woman. So it's all of that in a fun little fucking 80s movie, and with a message at the end from the stereotypical wise Asian man.
Oh, there's a great deal of Orientalism in this. This is
Of course, yeah. I mean, yeah, and you know,
but I gotta say, Key Luke really sells it. I mean, he
does.
He still embodies it with a sense of respect for. He doesn't. It's a caricature, but he still has a level of humanity in it that lifts it. And
yes, dignity and humanity.
Yeah, I think it's there, and I think his role is I would have loved to have seen more with him in this one and in the second film, but I think he does, with the little bit of time that he has, he does miracles with it.
Yeah, and I mean, then the the kind of the lecture at the end. Your
Mm-hmm.
society has done with the Magwai what it has done with all its gifts. You're not ready. Um, I mean, there is that Orientalist aspect of, this. This is the wise character. This is the fucking the Whoopi Goldberg of this film.
Yeah.
Th- there's that, but at the same time, like he's not wrong. Um, and it, it doesn't hit you over the head with it. I mean, it tells you explicitly, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it's kind of like it's stated, and then it's kind of moved on when it's like, okay, this creature has these words of wisdom. When I first showed Leslie, because I have two relationships to this film, because I have like my childhood, but I also like Leslie saw it like last year or the year before
Mm-hmm.
for the first time.
Oh wow. Okay.
And she was like, and I'm still getting to this point about what he says, but now kind of cutting this part in, but she was like, what the fuck are you showing me? Because she didn't know like really anything about it. And so it's like,
She
okay,
didn't
this
even know the
thing,
mythology of it, because this is kind of an iconic film. I mean, if you grew up in the 80s and either you were watching this as a kid or you had parents, it was an unbelievably powerful thing as far as people watching this. And there was a while there where it was like gremlin fever. It's like anything with something that something that is cute and something that scares the shit out of you at the same time. I mean, this is a film that this film, along with Spielberg, who produced this film, Spielberg's Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, these are the two films that got the ratings board to institute the PG-13, something that was a little bit more adult than PG, but not as bad as an R. These are the two films that got that ball rolling. Because,
mm,
and especially because of the kitchen sequence in this movie. And I got to tell you, man, as I was watching it, I was laughing out loud. I woke the dog up a couple of times because I was laughing at how ridiculous some of it was and over the top, but at the same time creepy and scary and kind of like it's very strange to go back because I haven't seen this movie in a decade, probably more. And watching it, it's not that I was watching a new movie that I had forgotten about. It was that everything that happened in it was rushing back to me from my original memory. When you're 10 years old and you're watching this shit, you're blown out of the water because you're not expecting to see something this violent, this crazy. And Joe Dante, the director of this film, he you can tell he comes from the Roger Corman school of making the most with what you got. These puppets have these gremlins have character. They have there's depth to it, which is weird. They're
yeah.
gags, but there is also depth, and I love that. I forgot really what a good time this movie was.
I mean, so yeah. I mean, it's this. Everything that you're describing. It's like I'm reliving it with Leslie, um, and yeah, that kitchen scene, and then after once there's the moment where the mom, the Christmas tree and the
Mm-hmm.
mom, it's basically a rape scene.
Yeah, it was a rape scene because he's on her back and he's pulling. Yeah, I mean, it's like
Yeah,
fuck.
and she's like screaming and everything, and so many times Leslie's like, "What the fuck are you having me watch?" Um,
Do you think
and
she didn't
then
get it, or because this is
no,
a
she
black
gets it.
comedy? This is a very
Yeah,
dark
I
comedy.
mean, she's laughing.
Mm-hmm.
She's
Oh,
fucking
okay, all right.
laughing, and she's and because it's getting more and more
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous, and and first she's like, "Does anything happen to this dog?" Because the dog is like at one point hanging from on the porch with the Christmas lights
Mm-hmm.
and like freezing. Um, and I'm like, I don't remember. I don't think so. Um, I doubt it, you know. And then they kill the teacher, and she's like, goodbye, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting crazier and crazier. And there's this like just the amount of like how vulgar they are and how sexual they are and how fucking like gluttonous they are. It's it makes you laugh, but it's fucking horrible. Um, but it makes you laugh because it's fucking so horrible. Um, and how violently they die, and the fact that like at one point they're playing poker, and one, I guess it's Stripe, he fucking shoots another one of the gremlins right in the face,
Mm-hmm.
point blank, fucking doesn't give a mad fuck, and it's just so irreverent
Yeah.
that you just go like, you just fucking laugh because it's like, what else are you gonna do? You just fucking, you have to laugh. You just have to laugh, and these people are fucking getting killed, and like, and it doesn't, and it's different from a type of film where people are getting killed, and you're not laughing, you're just fucking like, fuck, like these people are getting killed. You're not fucking crying either, but it's, you know, different films obviously have different tones. In a slasher film, you may not be laughing, you're just like, holy fuck, like
Yeah.
how each, you're waiting to see, as you've talked about the creativity involved in creating these kill scenes. These also have creativity in terms of mostly how the gremlins get killed. But it's just blowing off all this steam, and it's a ridiculous fucking movie, and you're just going right through it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like
So that
if you fight the ridiculousness of it, you're not going to have a good time. If you take it too
no,
seriously, but if you lean into the fact that it's you know, I don't think it's a Christmas movie. I have a real problem with movies that people say are Christmas movies. I think movies are set at Christmas, but they don't have a Christmas spirit to them. There's very few films that are actually Christmas movies. The Polar Express is a Christmas movie. A Christmas
we should do an
Carol,
episode just
obviously.
on that because I think it's a conversation because it's
Hmm.
like, well, how do you obviously this whole thing happens because of a Christmas gift.
Hmm.
So
But it doesn't
I don't know.
embrace the spirit of Christmas. It's not a Santa Claus story. It's more of a parable of Orientalism, of you're not ready, and warnings about our own. I mean, this is a worst case scenario of bringing a dog home and bringing a dog home for the kid, and the kid is not ready to take care of a dog. That's what this is. But it's extreme, and it's playing into the idea of gremlins as being real things. I mean, there was a real belief that during World War II, gremlins were in, I believe, aircrafts, and that was one of the things that brought American aircraft down. I mean, there were people who believed this shit. It's hinted to in the movie by the Dick Miller character, Mister Futterman, and I love Dick
Yeah,
Miller. Dick Miller
he's
is one of
afraid
the
of
great character
aliens.
actors, huh?
Foreign fucking yeah. He's afraid of all these foreign like germs and all this shit
Yeah.
like that. Yeah,
And he really leans into the character, and he's just so much fun. And it's I can't remember if her name is something Johnson, Jackie Johnson. I can't remember who his wife is, but that's those two as the Futtermans are a pairing of the old Roger Corman films, the American Public Pictures or whatever, American Independent Public Pictures or whatever, where Dante himself got his start along with Scorsese and Spielberg and any number of other of the great '70s directors into the '80s directors. They all got their start off with Roger Corman. These two actors were in Little Shop of Horrors. They were in a number of other films that they produced. So it's kind of this movie is not only a black comedy and but it's also it's also a movie lover's, if you know movies really well, there is a greater appreciation because there are nods to It's a Wonderful Life, there are nods to A Christmas
Yeah.
Carol, there are nods to, and then there's all kinds of different in jokes about gags with the Gremlins. As there's a Humphrey Bogart moment as one of the
Yeah.
which I just fucking
Yeah.
love
It's great.
because it doesn't
Yeah.
belong there at all. It almost derails the it really almost
tone.
derails the narrative. The tone too, because it's like, wait a minute, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
This is a gremlin with a fedora
But it adds
sitting
to the tone.
and it does.
Yeah.
It
I
does.
guess yeah.
I love that moment because it's so ridiculous. And then there's a Flashdance moment, and anybody listening to it now doesn't even remember Flashdance.
Right.
But there's so many little things. In the first film, at least, there's a not. I mean, Dante is a director that loves movies, and he incorporates them into his film as character pieces, as
Homage.
helping us, homage, but also helping it, like Gizmo in this movie, and more so in the second movie. And
Right.
I'm eager to talk about that one as well. But there's this embracing of the hero role, and Gizmo. It was important to Spielberg, as the executive producer of this film, to amp up Gizmo's role as the hero. He has, because think about it, he's the one that suffers the most. He's the one that's tortured. He's put on the dartboard. I mean, they really beat the shit out of him.
And all
it's
of these,
fucking
and all of this evil basically springs from him because he was the gift. He was the
gift, but it was the appropriation of him though, because it's not his fault. I mean, the Zach Galligan character, he even offers Gizmo food at one point, and Gizmo's like, "No, I'm not hungry." You know, he's busy doing other shit. And part of it is like he knows he can't eat after midnight, but these little fuckers are going to turn into something different, and it's like he's, as strange as it is, Gizmo's the real hero of this film. And so by the end, part of the problem with the movie was when they were making it was the designer of the Gremlins and Gizmo. They weren't given full instructions on what was going to be expected. As Spielberg watched the dailies, he said, "Well, we need to make Gizmo more proactive. He needs to be involved more." But they got this doll that can't do anything because you can't move it around. It can't move like the Gremlins are a lot more flexible because they're bigger, you know?
Yeah.
So you can work them like Muppets. Gizmo, you couldn't do that. The solution was to add that. I mean, this is brilliant filmmaking as far as I'm concerned on Dante's part, in putting him in that car and having him drive around that that Sears or whatever department store it is.
Yeah.
But cutting it so that it looks like Clark Gable in the film that he had watched of it. So this character, Gizmo, is absorbing the expected hero role from what he sees in movies and is leaning into that. I think that's fucking great. I love that. That's not something that I would have understood back in '84. I didn't see it then. I see it now, because of years of watching movies and understanding what movies are capable of and what they're trying to do. I love that.
It's kind of like when E.T. is watching that film, and because Elliot is empathically connected to E.T., Elliot plays out the scene that E.T. is watching on the TV, but Elliot plays it out in school after he releases the frogs. When he kisses the girl, it's along those lines. It's very, in a sense, it's like it becomes a fucking like an ancestor of Tarantino because it's
sure, yeah.
His whole fucking identity is based on doing shit like that. You know what I mean? Like and recreating previous films in his own image. and creating his own works of cinematic art through that. And it's an interesting film being, right there mid 80s basically, because now you start to see all of this 80s shit kind of revolving around this. What was happening contemporarily to it, what happened before, what happened after. You're thinking fucking Corey Feldman, he's fighting these gremlins. Okay, later on he's going to be fighting vampires and the Frog Brothers or whatever, and so you're seeing you're seeing these actors, you're seeing these characters, Phoebe Cates, and Phoebe Cates has her own fucking iconic 80s moment. And so it's an interesting kind of timepiece that isn't only limited to itself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because it hyperlinks in your mind to other films. And not a lot of films do that. Some films are so of their time, but they're only that one thing. They can make, we'll sit here and we'll talk about a certain film and we'll say, well, these are other films that are contemporary to it, and was there a certain kind of thing going on at that time or whatever. But, maybe something like Starman or something like that isn't going to, from the same year, isn't going to necessarily, like, in your mind spin off into all this other shit. This does.
Yeah. It's I think because the first film, at least, is so aware of itself and what it is, and it's and I commend Joe Dante on what he's doing, because number one, he goes out of his way to make it look like a backlot, and he goes out of his way to make that the little town of Kingston Falls, is that what it is? Kingston Falls?
I think so. I don't remember exactly.
He makes it look like Bedford Falls, from Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. And that's what that town looks like. And then when the gremlins start going crazy in it, you can kind of imagine Jimmy Stewart making that run as he remember as he runs from the bridge back into town, because he's Merry Christmas everybody, and he's Clarence has saved him from the suicide that he wants, and it's I think that's an underlying element of the film that is, I mean, it's certainly not, kids watching this film are certainly not going to be aware of it, but if you know movies, there's something that's going to be triggered in you. Yeah, because there's a wholesomeness to it, there's a sweetness to it that makes itself seen, and I don't think the film could have been. The film couldn't have been made in a Chicago or a Los Angeles, or it had to be the down home Midwestern world of Capra, thrown on its head, invaded and destroyed by these monsters, because it gives it a little bit more. For it to be New York or L.A. or Chicago, it's one more fucking mess, which is what the second film does. And
right,
we're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't know how you feel about that film, but I certainly do love it and have a great time with it for a lot of the reasons that I love Tobe Hooper's Chainsaw 2. But we'll get into that. Let's finish
that's
with
a good
this.
way of putting it. Yeah.
But this has a great hero villain setup with Galligan and Phoebe Cates and everybody else playing side. I mean, they're really just supporting roles to what the Gremlins are. And then you have just a great ancillary villain, Polly Holiday as Mrs. Deegan, or she's horrible,
Deacon or something like that.
She's fucking horrible. So when you see her on that staircase lift or whatever, I remember watching that in a theater, and You should not be laughing at an old lady being thrown out of a window like that, but it's fucking
It's
hilarious,
fucking classic.
isn't it? And if you remember, they play. There's a lot of nods to the Wizard of Oz in this film. I want that little dog. Once I get that dog,
Hmm. Hmm.
I'll kill him
Oh
slowly.
yeah.
And so what happens? You see, what's the last image you see of her? You see her in the chair, in the snow, just the feet. That's Wizard of
Yep.
Oz. It's Dante paying homage, but in a much different way than Tarantino. He's not recreating something. He's being inspired by it. Now, anybody who's listening can just say, "Well, you're just rationalizing because you like Dante and you hate Tarantino." I don't think so. I think there's a palpable difference, and I think what Dante does makes it work. I think really he's one
Yeah.
of the really underrated directors of the 1980s. Never made a classic, never made anything that was substantial, as they say. He never really went for a powerful dramatic film, but the films that he made, The Burbs, Matinee, uh, Innerspace, this film, The Howling, he really did some really remarkable genre work. And I think he might have been the best at what he did.
He's really good at creating an atmosphere and a kind of a world for the world of each story.
Hmm.
Um, and this one is, yeah, so much built with other, Judge Reinhold,
Hmm.
um, Snow White, the fact that all the Gremlins, it's a cinematic movie. They're all in the theater watching Snow
Yeah.
White. Um, the there was a lot of like Fight Club stuff to me. I don't know why when I was watching this, because it's like even the aspect of like seeing the Gremlins at the projector, like fucking with the reels. And you see this also in part two,
Yeah.
more blatantly, but they're not only a part of the story, but they're also fucking with the way that the story is told.
Hmm.
Um, the whole, Snow White, the dwarfs and all of this, but these are these fucking gremlins. Um, it's interesting. It's one of those things that's like there's it's greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, this is old school
so,
filmmaking. When I was watching it, it reminded me a lot of Buster Keaton in the fact that it was, let's get together a bunch of gags and then build a story around it. If you watch The General, that's just gags. And then you fit the narrative in underneath it. So he has a train. Let's see what kind of adventures we can get into. You have this idea. Dante has this idea of little monsters that run amok. What kind of shit will they do? Well, they're gonna drink, they're gonna smoke, they're gonna harass women, they're gonna fuck with machinery, and he takes it to extremes. But even that, the screenplay that was originally written was supposedly a lot darker. They toned it down to make it a family comedy, which I think was the right move, because a film like this is a fucking idea like this is ridiculous. So if you're going to make a ridiculous idea, it makes sense to make it a comedy and make it aware of its own ridiculousness and to lean into that, not be afraid of it. Make characters that are horrible, but are somehow, I like the Gremlins. They make me laugh. They're fucking hilarious. No, you wouldn't want to encounter them in real life, but if you could watch that shit from a distance, it's hilarious. It's great. It
yeah,
says a lot about who we are. It reminds me of the Carlin bit of watching natural disasters the closer they are without you being in it is what makes it exciting. As long as it's not affecting me personally, I can't wait to watch that show.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're definitely like, um, Gizmo is kind of like the child,
Yeah.
but at the same time, he has aspects of like a healthy adult who knows how to put limits on himself. It's like, no, I'm not going to eat right now because it's past midnight. You
Yeah.
know, unlike me, when I get home and fucking eat past midnight and drink, and I'm like, I shouldn't, but hell yeah, I am. You know, because
Because I've
I'm a
earned it.
fucking gremlin
Yeah.
too. Yeah, because I fucking earned it. And and whereas it's almost also like the Wild Bunch. These fucking
Yeah.
gremlins come over and fucking take over the suburb, and it's like, what are you rebelling against? And fucking Stripe is like, what do you got? You know what I mean? It's kind of like all of it. Like, he has a fucking mohawk. There's something punk rock about him in terms of like, I'm a teenager and I'm gonna fucking go to the movies and I'm gonna fucking fuck everything up and I want to fuck everything and I want to eat everything. There is definitely that aspect of adolescence and rebellion. And so, in that sense, it's kind of like you are rooting for them to kind of like literally blow off all this steam in this fucking sleepy, boring ass fucking suburb. And to include fucking, bringing some kind of like poetic justice to that greedy, evil villain. At Christmas time. You know what I mean? Like, she's the fucking Scrooge. And this person wants to harm an animal, and then now these fucking creatures are going to get her. And it's kind of like, well, this is what you fucking get.
It's also
And
like she's great because there's also little touches. Did you notice what her cats were named?
I don't remember what are they named?
Ruble, peso, dollar. All of her cats
Oh
had money.
yeah. It's money.
It's subtle. You don't even catch it. You're just like, oh my God. I was watching it last night. I was laughing my ass off because I was like, this bitch is evil. This bitch is horrible. And they said something,
Yeah.
and they slipped something in about her husband at the end dying in prison or something after bank fraud or some shit. If you listen closely over to, I mean, Dante is really good at throwing in little things like that and just like little jokes that you either catch or you don't catch. There was a moment in the second film when the Futtermans are looking at the cathedral. They're at the church. Do you remember what the cathedral was called?
It was like a composite name, right? It was like
No,
something
it was a
Eve.
backwards name. It was the Cathedral of Saint Eva Marie.
Eva Marie.
Eva Marie Saint was in North by
Yeah.
Northwest.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments where I just started laughing my ass off because I was like,
Yeah, because
that's a
it's
great
also
joke.
playing Ave Maria.
Yeah. There was so much shit in it. Like there was a moment where the gremlin turns into where they inject the gremlin with the bat serum. And Christopher Lee just looks at it, and you can see there's some kind of weird deja vu connection, and you can hear the Hammer Dracula music over and it's just, and Christopher Lee just leans right into it. I think to see Christopher Lee to show up, just to watch Christopher Lee show up and slum like he's doing in this film, because this is fucking slumming.
Oh yeah.
But it's absolute fun. It's absolutely brilliant. And you're watching it just laughing your ass off because you get this sense that Christopher Lee is in on the joke and he gets it. And he knows I'm Dracula. I will never get away from being Dracula. I'll never get away from being a mad scientist. And I've built, people are afraid of me. And the character just a mad scientist who just wants to hurt and maim, and I think he's great. The second movie, I can't say that I like the second movie more than I like the first one. Joe Dante, the director, prefers the second one. But what I do admire of it is that it swings through the fences, and it doesn't hold back. It holds a little bit back with the Clamp character, but we'll get into that. But what's really great is that there is no joke that's too low for it. There's no. It's really a Mel Brooks-esque comedy without the sexuality in it, and there's a lot about it where you're watching it just saying, this film is fully aware of how ridiculous it is. And I think Dante, who didn't want to make the film originally, because you got to remember, 84 was the original Gremlins, 90 was the Gremlins 2. In that interim, they had been struggling to make a sequel because the film hit really hard, and they weren't prepared for it to be the box office success that it was. So there were ideas of sending the Gremlins to Las Vegas. They were at one point going to Mars. It really got out of hand. Dante didn't want to have anything to do with it because he felt like it was a contained story. He had said what he wanted to say. But when they told him, complete artistic freedom, you can make the movie that you want, director's cut, he said okay, and he made what a lot of people consider the most subversive, big screen, big budgeted, major studio film ever made. This shit is crazy. And that's what I love about it. It has such an anarchic feeling to it where it's like we don't give a shit about how movies are made or the rules that are involved. This movie is fully aware, even such to the point where Phoebe Cates gives another speech that parodies her original, a Lincoln's Day speech that parodies her Santa Claus speech, where a lot of people didn't know. They wanted to cut that scene out of the original film because they didn't know this is a comedy, but now it's dark. What the fuck are you doing? And it makes for the perfect setup.
And it's like, where the fuck is this story gonna go?
Yeah,
because it's come here, little girl. And it's kind of like, and he's like, yeah, we don't have time for this right now.
You can see she's just fucking traumatized by it, but no, we got to get back to killing these things. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I had never seen part 2.
Yeah, that was crazy that you had missed it.
I had never seen it, and so this is one of those films that I wish I would have seen it before, because seeing it now.
Oh, you're too old and pissed off.
I'm bringing it.
You're just too fucking miserable to like this.
There's too much shit that I'm bringing into it
I know.
I'm like that I can see. I'm having a hard time. So what I'm trying to do as I watch this, and now that I've seen it and process it, is like split my mind between, especially because of the Daniel Clamp, Donald Trump character, basically.
Donald Trump, Ted Turner character. Don't forget, this is a combination.
There's Ted. There's right.
Yeah.
There is that too because of the media aspect of it. The broadcasting aspect of it. But so there's the Donald Trump of the 80s, and that version, and then there's the one that we've all come to know.
Yeah.
And so there are things in this film that I can't help but view as somewhat prescient.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm watching this mayhem in New York, post 9/11, post Occupy Wall Street, all this shit, way fucking post all that, right?
Oh, yeah. 2 decades post.
But it still colors your view of it because this is in the 80s. And so, and post Oliver Stone, his Wall Street. And so it's like, I see the possibility of reading this film as like a critique of reading this film as a critique of the U.S.'s financial center and its symbol of like corporate greed and all, which it is a critique of that. But I feel like with the 80s Trump-like character, which connects with like kind of like the Biff character in Back to the Future, and even the building itself kind of reminded me of RoboCop and the fucking like that fucking dystopian kind of building and this kind of technocratic world. It's I see it as potentially a critique of that, but I feel like it didn't go far enough in the critique, because I feel that in the critique that it got lost in its humor, so that it could have been satire, and it didn't kind of like elevate itself to the level of satire. It stayed within cute.
Well, here's the problem with your reading, and I'm not saying it's your reading is coming from a 2024 where nobody expected it to get this fucking. It's like how can you make a joke about something that is as ridiculous as it is? You know? Yeah.
Well, this is what I'm saying, and this is why I prefaced it with that. I mean, I understand your rebuttal to me from the perspective of like, okay, are you rebutting? But am I talking about only the post fucking like Trump presidency? No, because like you could still make those critiques, because it is already approaching critiques of the Trump as like the personality and the greed aspect, not the fucking. I'm not saying that it should talk about Trump as being the biggest gremlin and his little followers as gremlins who are destroying the institution that is the Constitution and this building as the Capitol and all that. I'm not talking about that, even though I can see the movie now and like I can read that into it.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just talking about just in terms of forget Trump as president, forget Trump as, just go back to Trump as Biff, go back to Trump as just this tycoon fucking greedy, self-serving celebrity asshole before even his show, before his fucking Trump show, the reality show, just from the point of the 80s. Still, it's already making that commentary because this is based on him in part, but I don't think it's making it far. It doesn't do it enough. It doesn't indict that kind of The first one indicts the Scrooge woman's character. You mentioned the dogs. The names are already like, it's indicting them in a fun way, subtle enough, but obvious enough. It can, you know, if you're not paying attention, you're just following the zaniness, whatever, but it still comes through. This, it's so fucking zany. Yeah. That a lot of these things kind of get lost. Yeah. Ultimately, the lesson to me is that there was no lesson learned at all, because, spoiler alert, in the end, he's like, that's the new thing to do, is we're going to build the greatest, biggest small town.
Well, that's the problem that I have. I don't like that character is humanized. I would have rather it been. I would have rather he got his comeuppance. I would have rather he had gotten killed by the Gremlins. It would have been a much darker thing. That's the one real complaint I have about it. I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what I do not have an issue with what you're saying in any way, shape, or form, except to say that it's in 1990, I think the blade would have been sharper than the dullness that life has given to it at this point, 24 years later. 34 years. This movie's 34 fucking years old, you know? I don't think that we could have ever anticipated things getting as out of control as they have gotten now. I think that maybe at the time, this was a much more poignant and sharper stab.
Critique.
Yeah. But
that's sad. That's fucked up.
That is fucking sad.
I think that's very plausible.
Yeah.
I think that's plausible, but it's again, like, that's part of the difficulty, and this is like where it's like, damn, like, are things this fucking bad that I see this critique as too tame.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, going back in time, it would have been like, oh, these fucking jabs at all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is
I
like the
mean,
conversation that we had about Barbie, where I was telling you the fucking this shit isn't enough. People are patting themselves on the back over something that is basic bitch shit at best. You could have made the fucking. I sent you that. I sent you that YouTube clip of the Tina Fey Amy Poehler
yeah,
sketch, which was 100 times harsher and meaner and on point than anything that was in Barbie. Um, at the time, Donald Trump wasn't. I think, with the exception of the Wilding, that fucking letter that he wrote.
mm-hmm.
I think the what was it? The Central Park 7. Those kids who went to prison for that rape.
Five, was it five?
Was it five? I
It
think
might
it
have
was
been five.
4 black kids and a Puerto Rican kid. I can't remember exactly. That were finally exonerated 20 some odd years later.
Yeah.
We should have taken that as the warning sign of what Donald Trump was capable of. But it was at a time where corporate greed. I think this is a fairly decent takedown of Reagan era politics and the need to make as much money. Now, I could be wrong, because 2 years earlier from this, John Carpenter had made They Live, which that is about as brutal and savage a takedown of Reagan era.
Right.
So maybe I
Plus
just
fucking Wall
leaned
Street.
into your view. I don't know.
Plus Wall Street. But the thing is,
Yeah.
that I think what was missed in this film, and now we're talking about what's the messaging or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. In terms of the critique, is that the blame is placed on the gremlins,
Mm-hmm.
these out of control fucking creatures, and there is a critique of this Gordon Gekko like character. So you have greedy, gluttonous gremlins basically going in to dismantle the dystopian, also gluttonous Gordon Gekko like Trumpian tycoons. How alliterative can I get? Technocratic.
Mm-hmm.
Complex, right? So there's blame placed on, okay, these are the gremlins that are doing this, and then there's the critique of this tycoon, and who's also with his lab and the experiments that they're doing. There's all that, but at the same time, it's kind of like society itself, the people who are part of this system, the people who submit to this system, the people who are in those buildings that he's mocking, that are eating all of these things and shopping there, they're also gremlins. And I think that part is like missed, is that we are also the fucking gremlins because we created this whole fucking scenario also. I think that's something that's like not addressed. And it's kind of like, ha 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 ha, those gremlins were fucking tearing apart New York. Ah ha 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 ha. Oh, that greedy person, like, is so fucked up that he didn't learn his lesson. Now he wants to turn around and sell this. Oh, ha 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 ha. And then we become basically the gremlins in the movie theater, laughing and watching this fucking movie and stuffing our faces. And we go out fucking like also mindless. Like I think that's a part of it that is kind of like, like what there's no mirror getting shown, like our image isn't being thrown back at us enough.
Yeah.
That's what I felt, because there's so much there that it's kind of like, and I'm not saying be preachy, because I think that this film does the opposite of that. It's like the opposite of on the nose. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't. It's everything is like glossed over.
Yeah. I think
So
you make valid points, but I think it's a wacky, zany slapstick commentary, and I think it's subversive. It's as subversive as it needs to be for the audience that it's going for, because at the end, this is a kids' movie, and I think part of the issue is that kids. I think these are like seeds that are planted in a kid's mind, where as they start to grow. I mean, because 1990, I was 14, 15 years old. The first film, I was about 10. Um, these films have definitely not been something that I just watched and had a good time with and didn't think about again. They played again in my head. They played again in my psyche. There were certain things about the rules, the like you said, the Key Luke character about you do with it what you do with everything of nature's gifts, but also looking at Clamp and seeing the evolution of Donald Trump and the suffering of America because of it. I mean, it's at the end of the day, I think the satire is there, and I think the satire is on point and as extreme as it needs to be for a kid's movie.
I mean, I would argue that there's a kid component
Mm-hmm.
that'll be like the external.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's an adult component, which will be the more internal, the more
Mm-hmm.
subtle, the thing that you
Sure.
like. Never ending story. We talked about this when we did the stories that kind of, the films that kind of shaped or defined me, or however you want to describe it. That's like a kid's movie. It's wrapped in that. It's wrapped in fantasy and this kind of kids like hero's journey or whatever. But the lessons in there are still these lessons that, like, you show me an adult who isn't fucking struggling with these things. And as we've gone through different phases of life, to include like, when someone retires and it's like, well, who the fuck am I? What am I going to do with my time, etc. Midlife crisis, earlier, whatever.
Yeah. The about Schmidt
There's
and
that.
all of us. Yeah.
All exactly.
Yeah.
And so there is definitely that. And so it is one that, like, had I seen it earlier, maybe I would have been able to, like, compare my mentality or compare, like, my impression of it or whatever to what I have now. Now I just, like, and it is hard to see a gremlin in a film and to see a Trumpian character in a film and not be like, well, and going back to the reasons why even in the first one, we like to see the gremlins destroy and bring shit down, I think is also why, people like Steve Bannon, these ideologues, they want someone like a Trump to use as a weapon himself. Like, he's a weaponized fucking narcissist who's being used also. And I don't mean in the sense of, like, by this shadowy cabal that's fucking ruling the world. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, like, people who have that certain accelerationist type of view, like Steve Bannon himself, describe Trump as, like, basically a fucking a wrecking ball to the fucking system. And I think his followers do actually, they like the fact that he is unabashed, that he is, like, unleashed. He is one of those gremlins that's gonna fucking, I mean, the left gets utterly, like, we clutch our pearls, and I consider myself to be on the left. In case you haven't fucking already noticed, like, we're not fans of fucking Trump, and we're shocked and whatever, insulted and at, the things that he says and the things that he does, but there are people that are laughing.
Yeah.
And there are people that are like, they consider him to be so free. And he can say all this crazy shit and they believe that it's the truth because he's authentically himself. And they can't distinguish between someone being authentic while at the same time that person is lying to them. And so it's kind of like this big fucking gremlin and all his minion gremlins, gremlin minions or whatever, like running wild. It is hard to distinguish between, you know, all of what it's become and what it was in the 80s. Yeah. But again, forgetting all of, or, you know, at least pretending to forget about all this shit from all the current stuff. Back then, like, Gordon Gekko was still a thing, you know, and so it is it's interesting. It's interesting to see how this plays out, even versus the first one, where what I was going to say earlier is that this is the part that kind of like made Leslie laugh the most, was that at the end of the first one, it's built up that, you know, there's this, you're not ready.
Yeah.
And then the Mogwai wants to say something to you. And then you're expecting, and Leslie was she kind of like leaned in like, oh shit, like what's the
wisdom?
The punchline? What's the wisdom of this fucking creature? What's this last final thing? And it fucking looks at it and it's like, bye, Billy. And Leslie was like, what the fuck? That's it? It was like, that's it. This is fucking Gremlins. This is a movie. This is the Gremlins movie.
Yeah.
I just felt like this film, the second one, didn't even have that. And it's not that the first one was this big fucking disappointment. It just kind of like made it funny and made it like, it just was what it was, and it was enough of that fucking little thing at the end. I just wish that, or not even wish, let me say it this way. I hope that whatever critique there was, I hope that those who were going to get it, got it, enough of it, and that, as you say, that the blade was sharp at that time, enough to at least cut into that critique. Of course, you know, it's not like this film and its critique, whether the critique was sharp enough or not, ever fucking did anything. But like, because we still got to where we got to it, it's not like the film was going to change that. But whatever impact it had, like, you know, hopefully it had it. Beyond just fucking like making someone laugh.
Well, I think it was.
Shit.
Yeah.
Hold that thought, but I'm saying some shit. That's all it should be, is like, just make you laugh, whatever. But I wish it was more satire and not just fucking comedy in some parts.
Well, there were aspects. I mean, I looking back on it now with this eye, yeah, I wish it were sharper. I wish it were kind of more, a little bit meaner in that respect. Definitely against the Clamp character. But there are a lot of subtle jokes in there that you have to really be paying attention to in order to. Tonight on Clamp Network, Casablanca colorized and now with a happier ending. You know?
Yeah,
it was shit like that that I remember Ted Turner. I remember Ted Turner doing that shit. Shit like that just made me laugh.
Well, there are parts of it that I'm like, fuck, like, you know, they're describing it as a smart building.
Yeah.
And it's like, there are elements where it's like the thing is speaking to you. It's at one point they call out someone's license. They call out someone's license plate number. And it's like, can the owner of whatever blah blah car, whatever, and they're like, your car is old and dirty.
Yeah, yeah. The materialism of this movie is so fucking on. It's hilarious. That shit makes me laugh. It just makes me fucking laugh. And, yeah, I think you're right. It could be heavier. It could be a little bit, and you know me, I would love for it to just be meaner. I love a nasty, mean-spirited, ugly film that doesn't worry about feelings. I love when they do that. But, that's just not what the film does. And I embrace what this one is. For its time, I think it made a pretty good statement. Yeah, it could have been a harder. It could have been a harder edge statement, no doubt. There's no doubt about that. Carpenter did it 2 years earlier. I'm sure there are other films that we could cite that did it that we're not that are not readily available to us at right off the top of our heads. But for what it is, there's some good laughs, and I kind of love what it says about the consumerism of the times. So I mean, it's a fun time for me. For those of you who saw it back then, here's I think what ultimately comes down to, for those who saw it in 1990 the way I did, you're going to love going back to it. For those who have never seen it like you, probably going to have the same kind of take on it. And I think in this instance, both of us are right for radically different viewing reasons.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, and this is
mm-hmm.
also one that's like, I still haven't fully digested this, and I know that, like,
Yeah.
Because it's got fucking Hulk Hogan, it's got fucking all of these cameos, it's all these references,
Mm-hmm.
Addams Family, like, there's a lot, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
There's monsters, like,
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on. So it is one of those things that that your viewing is still so fresh that it's like you're trying to make sense of it also, mm-hmm. and that your feelings about it and your thoughts about it might evolve, or they might change in a different way than you would expect. So this is my take on it now. I don't always kind of not acknowledge, but I don't always feel that way about, like, kind of my viewing. This is also, again, it's the time differential that changes it as well. So there's definitely that. But fun nonetheless.
Yeah. A lot of fun.
I think the first one is I enjoy it more. I think it's a superior film. It's more clean. It's kind of like everything that's necessary needs to be in it. The other one is more maximalist, more everything, including the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
And I think also another aspect of why I'm a little bit like less about the second one is also that I feel like if it has a critique, it also, to me, feels like it is guilty of being what it itself would critique, because there's part of it that feels like it's overly ambitious and money grabbing. In a sense that it's kind of like, did the sequel need even to be made? Or was it something to just do more of the same with bigger budget, more money to get more money?
It's definitely that. From the studio perspective. From the studio perspective, I can't see anything less than a money grab. But from what is put on the screen, I I see Dante giving a big fuck you to the studio and saying, if you're going to let me make this film, then I'm going to make the film that I want. It's one of the few times where a director is given such creative control that the studio, you can see that the studio would obviously regret it. I mean, there's nothing in
Yeah.
my head that says that there's nothing in me that tells me that the studio, if they had known what they were going to get, would have greenlit this film. There's just no way. And there's a part of me that just loves the fuck you mentality of it. I really appreciate it. I love that. I love when Gilliam has got away with it. I love this film for doing it. I love Carpenter getting away with it in They Live. And The Thing. I just there's a certain level of anarchy that goes
Yeah.
with the artistic vision that works for me. So although you're absolutely correct as a money grab, I still think it's a pretty good artistic statement on Joe Dante's part. And that's really what matters to me on that.
And it's one of those things that when you put it that way, it's kind of like, well, that's what draws people to the fucking chaotic aspect of the Gremlins to begin with. Is that they throw the fuck you to different aspects of society, whether they are representative of that society or as a product of that society or an antidote to that society or whatever. And it's like where you stand politically kind of like, leads to how you define what's fucking Gizmo and what's a gremlin. You know what I mean? Like Gizmo is Rambo and that's the hero for this narrative. But Rambo also fucking kills a lot of cops, you know what I mean? And there's definitely like a kind of perspectivism that comes into play where it's like, well, in a different situation, and I'm not saying it's a relativism because it's not. I think there are more clearly defined kind of like positions here, but at some point, some people are gonna fucking root for the Gremlins regardless of who it is that they're fucking over. You know what I mean? And otherwise, it's kind of like, well, I don't want the Gremlins to hurt Gizmo, but it's cool if they hurt fucking the villain.
Yeah.
I don't want Hannibal Lecter to hurt Starling, but I want him to help Starling find Buffalo Bill. And it's kind of like it goes back to Alien. Like the alien is going to kill the engineers, but the engineers are going to kill the humans. So once the aliens kill the engineers, but they're ultimately going to also try to kill all the humans. And so it just becomes like, who are the Gremlins? What do they represent? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because the Gremlins are not always necessarily like, they're not really like, who's the villain? Is it Clamp or is it the Gremlins? Who's the villain? Is it that woman or is it the Gremlins?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so is Billy the hero or is Gizmo the hero? Or is Gizmo just kind of like Yoda and fucking like, like, is it the Emperor that's the villain or is it Darth Vader that's the villain? Or is Darth Vader ultimately the hero? Or is Luke Skywalker the hero? You know what I mean? Like, it's all that. So it gets a little fuzzy, which is actually cool. I think that's cool because it isn't just the dangerous creature and the cute and warm and fuzzy creature. It is, but it isn't just that. Because we're all fucking gremlins, and whether we like it or not, there's a part of us that's a little fucking weenie Gizmo, but also Rambo Gizmo.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
That's true.
This episode goes to Jeremiah. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. Get us caffeinated and anxiety prone so we can fucking keep talking about these movies in a jittery and excited way.
Thank you so much, folks. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye now.